Good afternoon, everyone. It is Tuesday afternoon at 4 p.m. ET, and I am Hank Phillippi Ryan here on A Mighty Blaze with Mighty Mysteries. And welcome, welcome, welcome to you all this afternoon. We are welcoming today an incredibly special guest, the marvelous and storied Lisa Unger. Hey, Lisa, whose Last
Hi.
Girl Ghosted is out today. Happy Pub Day. Let me just tell you all really, really quickly. I love this book. It is timely, it is terrifying, it is full of secrets. And like all of Lisa's books, it is gorgeously and carefully
Mm.
constructed. So be careful what you read at the beginning because it will twist and turn and change until you get to the end. So mark your calendars. You won't want to have anything else to do but read Last Girl Ghosted. And we are indeed, as always, having a giveaway. So if you leave a comment before the end of the broadcast, one lucky winner will be chosen by the blazer in the back room to win a copy of Last Girl Ghosted. So welcome, Lisa. How was your pub
Thank
day?
you. It's crazy. Hi, Sherry. It's absolutely nuts. It's been nonstop since I like opened my eyes at 6 a.m. Just nonstop social media interviews. And I was just telling Hank before that I have my first live event, in-person event here in Florida in a little while. It's the first one since March 2020. Is that right? Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah.
Well,
So
I can't think of a better book to celebrate than, let me show it one more time, well, one of many more times than Last Girl Ghosted, which is just getting
thank
all the
you.
buzz. And let me welcome today also, and if I look over here, that means I'm looking at the comments. You know that I'm looking at the comments.
Oh
I
yeah.
see Sherry and I see Allie. Welcome, Allie, and Wendy and Jamie. So nice to see all of you here today. Um, Last night you were saying, um, last night, what's it like for you on the night before the day of? What do you do? Do you have special rituals? Do you celebrate?
I don't. I know it's funny. I get asked this question a lot, like about rituals and celebrating pub day. And I don't know. Maybe you feel the same way too about your pub day. It's like when the day that the book comes, like the day that the first hardcover book comes, like that day is like full elation. Like that is like kid on Christmas morning. Like can't believe that I get to do this. That I was like this thing that I dreamed of as a little kid is actually true, and that the book that I was writing for all that time actually found its way out into the world. Like
Yeah.
when I'm writing, I never think about publishing, right? Like even though I know I'm a published author, I have a contract, it never seems like it's ever gonna be read by anybody, like when I'm writing. So when it comes out, it's like super exciting. And then pub day is just always like, I don't know, it's almost like a wedding, it's like a whirlwind of like just, chatting with people on social media, doing interviews. A lot of times I'll already be on the road, already be traveling, book events, stuff like that. So I do try to celebrate and be present for it, like, sort of in my heart, but it's such a fast paced day that it's not really like, it's not really, I wouldn't say it was not necessarily like a party. And the night
No,
before,
no.
I think it's like the night before Christmas. You're just like buzzing, you're just like,
And it's since it's a business, we're always thinking, should I have done something else? What more could I have done? Is there anything
exactly,
I forgot?
exactly,
Oh my golly, is there all those kinds of things? So, I
exactly.
mean, I agree with you. It's celebratory, but it's also very, very serious. You're going a
It's
mile a minute.
very focused,
Yeah, and
you're
also
very,
trying to remember whether you've said something already in an event since you've said the same thing a couple
I'm
times.
sure I've said the same thing like 100. I'm sure, I mean, you and I have spoken together a million times. I'm sure you've heard me say things over, over and over. I mean, I could only be who I am, right? There's only so much of me.
I mean, I think that's kind of wonderful too. And I see people like Sherry and Amy, and people who have talked to you before. Stephanie is here today too. That's so wonderful. I mean, people come because we love you and we love
Oh,
to hear your stories. And it's
thank you.
always different, no matter if some of the tales are the same, but
Right.
we love hearing that. And we love being able to get together with you all. I can quickly say that that's exactly why A Mighty Blaze started. Caroline Levitt and Jenna Blum started it
Yes.
at the beginning of the
Yes.
pandemic to bring us all together. And absolutely, that's what it's done. And 4 o'clock ET every Tuesday is time for a mystery guest. And you are the mystery guest today, Lisa Unger, the author of Last Girl Ghosted. And let me read you the fancy formal bio of
Yes.
Lisa, even though so many of you know her already so well. We sit up straight for this.
I'm going to try to look really serious.
Okay, try that.
Okay. All right.
Me too.
I can't. I can't do it.
You can't do it.
Oh, well.
Lisa Unger is the New York Times and internationally best-selling author of 19 novels, including her latest, Last Girl Ghosted. With millions of readers worldwide and books published in 26 languages, Unger is widely regarded as a master of suspense. Her critically acclaimed books have been voted Best of the Year or top picks by The Today Show, Good Morning America, Entertainment Weekly, Amazon, IndieBound, and others. Her essays have appeared in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, NPR, and Travel and Leisure. She lives on the west coast of Florida with her adorable family. I put the adorable in there, but
they're very adorable.
Yes, I'm sure they're so thrilled with you today, or they've been through this 19 times.
They're there. They're there. And my husband has been to I think almost every event that I've ever been at, and he still manages to look really interested every time. And I really appreciate
talent,
right?
That is talent.
Yeah. He's heard it all. He could probably give the talk if he was called upon to do it. And every time he looks like it's the first time. So I appreciate him.
You know what? That's love and that's respect. That is love. That is love and respect. So now we are faced with the terrifying prospect of talking about a book when we cannot give away so much.
Right.
There's just so much in here that we can't give up. So let's do this. I'll start by telling a tiny bit about it. And then you pick up the story with just a little bit of what you feel comfortable with. And then we'll go sort of step by step.
Okay, perfect.
So it starts with a 6 months ago section, which we'll just skip. And then it goes to a woman called Ren, who is waiting in a bar to meet a man called Adam that she met on a dating app. Yeah. He seems wonderful, surprisingly. They have a relationship, and then he disappears, and she becomes obsessed. So tell a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So Ren is she comes from darkness, she comes from trauma, but, she's built a life. She's managed to sort of build a good life for herself with friends that she loves and a job that she loves. And, she's successful, she's wealthy. And, and it's her friend Jax who, really cares about her, a friend who's more like a sister than a friend. And she kind of pushes her into this online dating world, and which Ren doesn't really want. And she doesn't think anything's going to come of it. And then she has these sort of underwhelming encounters. And then she meets Adam. And when she falls for him, she does fall very hard. And then, they have this whirlwind romance. And then after a particularly intimate night, he makes a request. He says, "Tell me something that you've never told anyone." And she does. And it's after that confession, this sort of dark secret that she carries, that he disappears. So is she obsessed with him, or is she obsessed with the idea that she shared this part of herself with him, and he sort of, in a sense, took it? She gave him this dark piece that she had hidden from everybody, and then he was gone. And so then when a private detective shows up at her door, she realizes that there are other women who also thought they were in love with the man that she knew as Adam, and that all those women have disappeared.
Well, let me go back to that in a minute, because let me ask you first, though, I know you met your husband not on a dating app. So
a long time ago.
Where did the sort of core of this idea for this, and I don't want to call it a dating app book because it just really isn't. That's just the mechanism that gets into it.
Right.
Where did the idea for that come from?
Well, I had this conversation with a young friend of mine, and she was talking about these dating apps. Now, when I met Jeff, there wasn't really any apps. There wasn't even smartphones when I met my husband, but there were like online sites like that had just started. And I had met a couple of people that way. And people that I know did in fact meet their husbands, and wives that way, from those like sort of original, those OG dating sites or whatever. But it was, I don't know, it just seemed like that was very different than what exists now. And the way she talked about it, she said, there's just this like endless pool of choices, and you just keep swiping and swiping, and there's the next one and the next one and the next one. And she wanted to know, like, how do you ever know that you've chosen the right one? And that really stayed with me. And then something else that she said was like, once you've taken it to the next level, you've taken it off the app and into the real world, which is like, if that person doesn't measure up to what you saw online, then it's just so easy to ghost that person, never see them again, because you have no tie to them in your life. You don't share friends. Like once upon a time, the dating pool was very, very small. You had your town, your church, later it was cities, and then like your workplace and whatever. And the expectations are relatively small, like courtship, marriage. Now it's something, there's like an endless pool. And so there's an upside to that. Like you have so much more choice, but there's a downside to that too. Like, because there's no external reason to treat each other well.
Exactly. And that it allows you to, it sort of forces you when you actually meet someone in person. Well, two things. Yes. One is on the app, you can be whoever you want to be.
Yes.
And that's the first facade. And then in real life, though, there's this sense of expectation and trust, and that any moment someone could pull the rug out from under you. I mean, the idea that we have a name for it, ghosted, that someone just vanishes, that it's an accepted thing that happens.
Yeah.
And in the book, Ren's friend, Jax, Jax, is sort of the Greek chorus for it doesn't matter, whatever, just keep going. It's just for fun. But Ren, our main character, isn't like that. She really is. Talk a little bit about it.
Right. And that's really sort of the core thing about Ren, is that she's not like Jax. Jax is kind of, Jax comes more from the light. She had a difficult childhood, and then she just, had a single mom, but her mom is like this powerful force. And so Jax has that lightness to her that Ren doesn't have. Like Ren comes from, terrible trauma, and, and we can see in her how hard she felt, and then how devastated she was when he left. And but they've only been together for 3 months. And for her, it feels like, a long time, because it's the biggest relationship she's had in her adult life. But really, it's not that long. And so we really see in that, that attachment that she formed so quickly, her, and her fragility. Yes. And then how vulnerable she felt after she revealed this thing that she really spent her whole adult life hiding.
Well, I love that you brought up vulnerability and that darkness and the light and all the duality that's always throughout your books. And it is so well stated in this book that characters are from the dark or are from the light, that everyone has a secret, that the way we behave in public is not how we are in our hearts, and that there's always this a difference in how we present ourselves and how we really are, and what we want and what we'll do to get what we want, and how we sometimes, forgive me for babbling, don't really know what that is and why we're doing that. Talk a little bit about how that psychology comes into your work.
Well, it's interesting. Like when I was doing all my research, for this book and into online dating, I wound up sort of, there's a whole lexicon around like this sort of modern dating ritual, right? And one of the words that I came across, which I kind of made me laugh, it may be my favorite one, is called kitten fishing, right? And it's not, we all know what catfishing is, when it's like, you say that you're like a 20-year-old swimsuit model, and really you're like a 50-year-old mother of 4 living in, Tacoma or whatever. And there's another sort of layer to that, which is like where you put out a different sort of version of yourself in online dating. Like the picture might be 5 years old.
Uh,
Maybe you were 10, okay, 15 pounds lighter, or, you're standing next to a Tesla when you really, drive something, a little bit less sexy. And, so there's this, so that psychology of kitten fishing is, I think is what we're talking about in terms of you're putting out the best version of yourself, or what you think is the best version of yourself, to kind of draw people to you. But if it's too far from the truth, when you make that sort of, you take that step into the real world, then you can't sustain it. And that, that leads to a lot of disappointment and heartbreak, and, just sort of self-loathing. And so like that was part of the psychology of it as well. I mean, of course, like, Ren spends a lot of time trying to find pieces of him after he's gone. Like, how did I miss this? How did I not see this? And like, she's, often sort of talking to, in her work as an advice column, that she's talking to people about how they've been victims of the sweetheart scam, like, again, another way of like, you put out a version of yourself that's not true. Sometimes it's an outright con, but sometimes we lie to ourselves, like you were saying, and that we think we want one thing, but in fact, we want something else altogether. And we're like sort of notoriously bad at knowing what we want and acting in a way that brings it to us.
And if you just joined us, we're talking about Last Girl Ghosted by the fabulous Lisa Unger, that is burning up the charts today on launch day. We are so pleased to have her here. Lisa, thank you. This is my novel, Her Perfect Life, which is just hit a second printing. So I'm very...
Well, I was just bringing it up because I was thinking that there's a little bit of that too in here. There's a little bit of that, like there's a point where Greer is at Lily's house, and she's basically coaching her on how to be on camera. Like, you have to present this aspirational life, right? Like that was one of the lines for the book, which, by the way, is, I mean, of course, awesome, fantastic, brilliant, loved it, loved everything about it, love you, etc. But that was something that you touched on a little bit as well in your book.
I do. I think that this idea of having a veneer of perfection and presenting a picture of yourself to the world, when underneath, and not so far underneath, is this sort of roiling, unhappy, and as you so clearly and beautifully delve into, the childhood that created who you are today, and that sometimes that childhood comes to the surface in ways that you can't really predict. And this happens throughout in your characters.
And you don't even know, in the sense, like Ren, I think in a lot of ways, like she doesn't even know that she's acting out of that pain. And most of us don't, like if you're formed in trauma, or you've experienced something very dark and it's kind of shifted you at your core, you act from that place. And, there's a really brilliant book about trauma called The Body Keeps Score. And the author talks about how your mind will hide trauma from you. Like it will hide all the ways in which you are acting out of this place of pain until you go back and excavate it and face it down, right? So you might be a workaholic, an alcoholic, whatever it is. Like you might be addicted to food, or you might have another kind of behavior where you just kind of shut down when people get too close, or whatever it is. You're acting out of this trauma, you're acting out of this pain, and you might not even be aware of that. You might not even remember it.
And one of the things you do so beautifully in this book is introduce the readers to each character's pain gradually, sort of bit by bit. Talk about excavation. That's what you allow the reader to do, is to come to know the character as they are sort of facing their own origins. And I love that. Two quick questions about this, and they sort of go together. Ren also is an advice columnist, as you said, and I thought that was such a brilliant way of doing it. Not only to let her know about other people who have had the same exact situation, but allow there to be sort of a semi-philosophical discussion about what the right thing to do is and what the right thing to do for ourselves is, and how Ren can give advice to others, but is not very good at taking it herself.
Yeah, and I think I mean, that's definitely like a kind of a behavior, like a protective behavior. Like if you can pour so much of yourself into helping other people, you can forget about yourself, right? You can forget about what you need to do for yourself, right? And you can kind of masquerade as like, I'm doing all, I'm good. I'm so strong. I've come through this thing. I've survived. I'm powerful. I can show people the way in the dark. And that in many ways, like, and that, there's definitely a healing quality to that. And it's something that she really leans on in her life. But I think in some ways, maybe it's also like you're dealing with your own issues. Sure. while you're helping everybody else. And her advice column, it kind of, and I think it also touches on, something that I have noticed, like in a lot of the conversations that I have with people, it's like people are just lost, like in this modern world, the way things have changed so quickly in the way we communicate with each other. And don't even forget about the pandemic and COVID and how that's changed us, right? Like that, we can't even get to that. Like that's a whole other layer of like cultural trauma that we're going to be dealing with for like a decade at least. And, but it's like, how do you like find your way, like after this kind of thing? Like, how do you find your way? Not even if you don't have any trauma, like in this new world where all of a sudden you don't know what the right thing to say is. You don't know, like, oh, I sent this text and, this person thought I was mean because I didn't use enough emojis, or I'm on this dating app and this search for a mate, right, is an ancient search, right?
Well, I mean, one of the things about the book, and I had taken little notes as I was reading it, and there are words, I'm going to look at my own notes here, that said, I wrote very bleak, very primal, fear. But at some point, right? But at some point in Ren's journey, she is also optimistic under that.
Oh,
this wariness of technology and this sort of weariness with technology, and then, but underneath, she still manages, this duality that we're talking about, underneath, she still manages to have this hope and optimism.
Right. Because, she comes from this thought, her dad he's a, without giving too much away, he's like a doomsday prepper. He calls himself a collapsist, meaning that he thinks the world has already ended and that humanity just hasn't figured it out yet, that we're just in this steep, precipitous decline. And that she's raised with that, like the end days are coming and we have to learn how to survive when they come. And so she grows up with that. And then, she comes to realize, the world hasn't ended. Like you've ended, you've ended this, the world goes on. And so she had to step out from underneath that. She sees the light, but there's also this pervasive sense of like, every time she turns on the TV, it's like there's the wildfires, there's the honeybees are missing, there's this virus coming from China, there's all of this stuff that is, as we know, is like a apocalyptic level of bad news, like daily. And she sees that. But I think at the heart of the book, the heart of the book is that, and it's actually the final line of the book, is that, love is the way. You don't get to leave. The world may be ending. It may be, but you don't get to just hide from that. You have to be with your people and help, and everybody has to help each other if we're going to get to the next phase of
and what a journey though for her in the book to get to that was not an easy journey, and it's a gorgeous thing to read. There's the poet Rilke is used throughout, not only as epigraphs in between parts, but also as a way of connecting between Ren and Adam, for them to show that they do have this emotional connection. And, Rilke's so, about nature and about
Yes,
mysticism and how we're all, right, linked
exactly.
in some way.
Absolutely.
Talk about, is
Yeah.
he one of your favorite poets, and why did you decide to
He's
go with
long been, I mean, I'm not as obsessed with Rilke as I am with Carl Jung, but pretty close. I feel like what I find really interesting about Rilke and his poetry is that, really most of it is, they're his love letters to God.
him?
Most people pull out Rilke quotes and, use them for love, right? But it's really, it is about love, but it's about love for God. Like, he's talking to God in his poetry. Like, only you know the force of the storm. I live my life in growing orbits that move out over the things of the world. Like, he's talking to God about what he understands about the world. And that's something, when you read that work, I mean, at least for me, when I read those poems, like, I mean, I feel it like in my cells, like on a visceral level. And I think that, like, I don't know how much of it is like sort of, I think there's certain themes that have wound into the work before, but it really just, I think it was this moment, like, as I was writing the book during the pandemic, that I most, sort of remembered some of those phrases and some of the feelings that I had about Rilke. And I think it was just like a natural thing that it kind of found its way into this book. Like, it's not a pandemic book. It's not about
And it doesn't feel like that at all.
There is that heavy, there is that, that impending sense of darkness and doom that hangs over it.
Well, because you have set up a collapsist on one end.
Exactly.
And you have Rilke on the other end. And so there's the Lisa Unger duality,
right.
going like crazy.
Right.
And also, we are so in Wren's head in her search, in her obsessive search for Adam, that you've written it in this incredible voice that I don't think I've ever seen in a book before, where it's almost as if, well, it is as if Wren is talking to him throughout, sort of narrating her life and her search for him as she's telling us about it. Talk a little bit about where that came from. Did the book start that way?
It did. I mean, it's so when it comes to, character and POV and stuff like that, like, for me, there's not a whole lot of choice involved. Like, it's not like I sit down and go, I'm going to write a book about X. No, there's nothing like that. And I'm going to write it in the first person point of view. Like, no, there's no choice like that ever. So it's just, for me, it's really a voice. It's a character voice. I hear it. I feel something, a vibe about, I mean, maybe know a few things about the person. Like, I knew about Wren, that she'd been ghosted. I knew that she had, that she'd come from this kind of dark place, which, honestly is not totally dark. There was some light and some beauty to where she came from. There were some pieces of her father that, really served her later in the book. But, she came from that. And like, that's all I really knew. And so when she was talking to Adam, like, basically I knew that she had been ghosted, and I knew that they hadn't had this really super long relationship, but that for her, it was very, very big, right? Like, in her life. And I knew that, she, and the way she talked to him indicated to me that, it's a little bit unstable to be that involved with somebody that you're telling him what's happening after he's ghosted you. Like, he's left you, he's gone. But she's still so attached to him that she's telling him the story of what's happening after he's gone. And
it's very powerful. And her search for him is very powerful. And then her background with her father and nature and what her father taught her comes so gorgeously into play as we as readers rivetedly follow her on this search. And let me just read 2 seconds of this to you all, because there's this passage in there's this passage in the middle a little bit that I just want to read about her, what she knows about hunting. That she's hunting for Adam. And she says, In tracking, it's a known quantity that your quarry will probably elude you. You can follow the sign, the prints, the broken branches, but you may never find the creature that left little pieces of himself behind. Even when he's in your sights, one wrong move and he will dash away. Every good hunter knows that nature is smarter, faster, more sensitive than he will ever be. If you catch what you're stalking, it's a gift, something that's been offered, not something taken. But you still hunt if you want to survive. I mean, I almost burst into tears at that, because that is just the book.
It is. That is the book. That is the book for sure. Yeah, that's the heart of it, you know. And she is a hunter, and she is the prey, and that's true of all. That's true of all of us.
I mean, you'd asked. I mean, in the back of the book says, "Is she the predator or is she the prey?"
Right, because she thinks she's hunting him, but maybe she isn't.
But maybe something else is going on.
Right, absolutely. And Bailey says he wanted something and he didn't get it. Right, he's, you know, talking about Adam. He wanted something and he didn't get it. So I think he's still circling you.
And you can picture that, can't you? I mean, this is just, it's just so predatory, and it's just
right,
so sinister.
And when you've read the book, it's hard to talk about it. Like, you get, throughout the book, you get pieces of the lives of the other women who loved him.
Well, this is the thing that's so brilliant about this, and exactly what you're talking about is today on First Chapter Fun, we read the first, the 6 months before passage that begins the book.
Yeah.
And if you haven't heard this, go to First Chapter Fun, not right now, but after this, and you can hear Hannah Mary McKinnon reading the first chapter of Lisa's book out loud, which is riveting. And also, as someone who had read the whole book and then heard that first chapter again, then I thought, oh, how Lisa, I see what's going on now.
Yeah.
Did you design the structure of this book for that?
Well, I just knew that there were these other voices, and I didn't know what their pieces were yet. Like, I didn't know why they were there. And this happens to me a lot. You know, like, I write something and I don't know why it's there.
Yes.
And then, you know, but I know myself well enough by now to know that it just gets left, and that 50 pages from now, I'm going to be like, oh.
That's why that person called.
Oh, I get it. You know, it's almost like your subconscious knows the story better than you do.
I mean, don't you think it's not almost like it? It is like it.
It is like it. Like, the story's there. It's story's all there in your subconscious. You're just trying to, again, back to that word, excavate it, get it out, figure it out, you know, find the form in the marble, whatever it winds up being. And so, like, I knew that there were these, you know, but in terms of like how, I think that maybe I'm trying to think about like writing Mia and where each of the, how to talk about it without giving anything away, where each of those pieces leaves off. Like, they all sort of leave off at the same moment in a way.
Exactly. I mean, we're dancing around this, you all. Mia's the woman in the beginning of the story that we were talking about that
right.
just weren't going to mention, and you can hear it on First Chapter Fun, but Mia is a character in the book.
Yeah. And these pieces all end in a certain place, and then it won't be until the end of the book that you understand why they're there.
Giving, you know the puzzle, the entire picture of the puzzle, and you're giving your devoted readers a little piece and a little piece and a little piece, and then we put them together.
Except that I don't always know the whole thing either.
Well, at the end you do. Well,
until I get there.
So did you know the end, or did you know what was going to happen at the end? No.
Oh, no, never. Yeah, I have never had any idea. Oh, yeah. I mean, of course. I absolutely write for the same reason that I read, you know, because I want to know what's going to happen. And the story really does evolve for me on the page very similarly to the way it will for my reader later. You know, and of course, we've talked about this before. This is all first draft conversation, right? Like, this is all like, you know, the story has its voice, it has its way of telling, it has its way of structuring itself. And then, you know, there's another part of this process where you go back after you've written your first draft, you go back to page 1 and you start reading. And that's when your craft is always a big part of it. But, obviously I've been writing and reading since I was a kid. My entire education is focused on writing. I've never wanted to do anything else with my life. I've been honing these skills since I was a kid. I started my first novel when I was 19 years old. So I've been doing this for a while. And the craft is always part of it. It's not always magic. The pages don't always flow. You're in it. You're a professional, and yes, there is magic too. There's glitter and stardust, and there's pain and all of it, right? And like that's the joy of it. Like that's the amazing part about it. But then you go to the editorial part of it, and that's where the other layer of your craft and your knowledge of story come into play. Like, did I bring my reader along for this ride? Is my reader getting the same experience that I got when I was writing it? And if not, how do I fix that? And we talked about, just sort of nuts and bolts stuff, like at the, when I'm ready to turn it in, like when I've done my 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 drafts before it goes to my editor, I go through that book, I read it one last time, and I ask myself the same question about every chapter, every scene. Does this advance plot or character, or hopefully both? And if not, you've really got to look at it. Why is it there? Where did you fail elsewhere in the manuscript? How do you restructure? How do you, give information in a different way? And so that's the other part of the process. No less important.
I think is equally fun. I think that's equally
Absolutely.
fun, because that's challenging yourself to, enough now to know what a good book is. And now, and you also know now how to best make that happen. And that's very exciting. I mean, I know when I'm on close to my last go round of writing my books, I'll be reading along the draft, and I'll forget I wrote it. I'll just reading, and I'll forget that it was mine. And I think, oh, I guess this is done now. I'm not it's itself.
Exactly. Yes.
So I know we're almost up to question time. We are up to question time. Oh, yikes. But I see, here's Margit, who is here. And so many other people have joined us. Katie is here, and Allie and Anissa. So nice to see you all. Predatory. Sharon Bishop is saying predatory like cat and mouse or stalker. That's a question.
Is there a difference? I mean, a cat is... I was just writing about cats the other day. A cat is the ultimate predator.
Ultimate.
Yeah, they really like they're tiny lions. Like if they could kill and eat you, they would.
I think sometimes they think they are. I mean, but their poses and their thought process.
Yes, they're like, it's funny, when you think about it, right? So cats are predators, cat and mouse. That's
in your cat and mouse books, like my cat and mouse books, essentially, is that still who's the cat and who's the mouse?
Who's the cat
and that's the conflict of them.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's take some questions. Here's one from the fabulous Sherry. Welcome, Sherry. How do you write, on computer or handwritten?
I often write longhand a lot. Sometimes I just need to get away from the screen. I'm so sick of it. We're in front of it so much, and sometimes I just need that visceral pen on paper. Some people, some books demand to be written almost completely in longhand.
Why is that?
I don't know. Sometimes it just wants to be told that way. And then in that way, when that happens, it's interesting because there's like when you're transcribing what you've written into the computer, that's like the first editorial phase for those kinds of books. Some books want to be written all over the place. Like it wants to be on the laptop. I want to be on the floor. I want to be downstairs. I want to be wherever. And then some books just want to be at the desktop, where you're just sitting at your desk and writing. And I don't know why.
The feeling of that is so odd, because I just wrote a short story a couple of weeks ago, and I'll use the Lisa Unger terminology. It wanted to be dictated. And I did it in Word, just with dictation. I just said the whole story as I went.
Wow.
And it was unbelievable. And so there, all the words just appear, and usually they're semi-right. And then you can go right into editing the words on the page.
Exactly, because you've got to go fix it from the voice to text.
But it was so fast. It was really interestingly fast. It's a wonderful technique. So I'm doing it now in my current book. as
Wow.
well. So I agree with you that there's a way. And when I'm trying to think of something, I'll, since I don't know either what's going to happen next in the book, I'll have a scene where somebody leaves a envelope on the door, and I'll think, okay, I wonder what's
All
in that.
right. Well, I wonder what's in
And
there.
I'll make a list. I'll just make a list in pencil of what could be in that. A
Right.
map, a letter, nothing, a photograph, a picture, a clipping, a page from a yearbook, all the things that could be in that. And just
Yeah.
by listing, I think I come up with the thing
Yeah.
because I let my mind.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever technique you use, like for me, like if I were stuck and I was like, I reached a point where I didn't know what was happening next, I get up.
Uh-huh.
You can't go on social media, but you can go for a walk. You can go to the gym. You can do yoga. You can bake a cake. You can do the laundry. Anything, anything
Put your
that,
mind in a different road.
yeah, that puts your mind in a different place and gives you that blank space. And then that's where, oh, okay, I got it. And then you go back. And like, that's kind of my day to day.
I agree. The shower is also good. Shower is also.
Oh, shower is amazing. What is it about the shower? Like, that is, I have had the best ideas in the shower. I really have. Like, wow.
I mean, and I guess your mind just relaxes.
I think it's just really relaxed. The water's really hot and steamy, and like our shower is like white subway tile, so it's very blank. It's like a blank space.
And you could maybe write on it like this.
Right, exactly. You could draw.
And then it would be gone.
Yeah,
we had a question a minute ago that I thought was so great. Wendy, this wonderful question. During your research, did you set up profiles for yourself on these dating sites?
I didn't.
Did you go to dating sites, research dating sites?
I did. I researched the dating sites, and I really did want to create a profile for myself. Like I really did, but I, just eventually just did not, because I don't know. I asked Jeff, I was like, hey,
would you mind?
Do you mind if I set up some profiles for myself on these dating sites? And he's like, I guess. That's fine. And it just felt so odd. I mean, because it's not really about, research is not always really just about like that kind of thing, like that nuts and bolts thing. Like it's all, it's all out there, right? If you want to know how to do something, like how to make something function, right? And it's all out there, and you pick up enough peripheral knowledge just from the research that you do that you know how it works. But I don't actually want it to be, I didn't want it to be Tinder or Match or any of those things. I wanted it to be my own thing. I wanted it to be Torch. I wanted it to have its own rules of engagement. I wanted it to be my thing. And then the story
that there's a fire theme throughout. I mean, you make it be Torch.
Right.
A fire theme throughout, and this passion theme throughout.
Fire is a big theme for me in a lot of the work. It's a big theme. Like for me, fire is like a cleansing. It's like a catharsis. So and the book is not so much about, like, if I were researching dating apps to write a journalistic piece, then yeah, I would put out fake profiles of myself and and do that to investigate. But I'm really more interested in people. I was more interested in not in the dating site so much as how it changes the way we interact with each other.
Yes, and that's what I was saying at the beginning, exactly, that it's not a dating app story. That's just the first domino that falls. I think if you had set up a dating app, and we're running out of time, if you had set up a profile on a dating app, all you would really have learned, which might be interesting, would be what you would have said and gone through the thought process of someone who was doing that, deciding how to present yourself.
But I'd have to be in that place for it to be authentic. I'd have to have been a person who wanted to date that way. Like I'd have to want that. Like otherwise it's just me pretending to be, it's just me catfishing people.
That's great.
I'm the 50-year-old. I'm not the 20-year-old Zoom model. I'm the 50-year-old mom of.
You're the blazing rock star, New York Times internationally best-selling mom, which anyone would love. Whose new book, Last Girl Ghosted, is out now. Thank you. Well, we'll get a photo of this. Next on Dateline, author's catfish. I don't even know.
That's funny.
Last Girl Ghosted in the spotlight today, no matter how many times Lisa holds up her perfect life, which I am
We always do
infinitely
this to each
envious.
other.
But they're both about fame, and they're
Yes.
both about family, and they're
Yes.
both about notoriety, and they're both about lies, and they're both about looking for what we want. And yet they are two.
Female relationships, and how that can be tangled, and how it can be wonderful and supportive and amazing.
And that is the perfect benediction. You are wonderful and supportive and amazing. And your book, Last Girl Ghosted, is fantastic. Today's winner of Last Girl Ghosted is Wendy Catalano. Do not set up a dating profile for yourself, Wendy. Just send your email to me and I will send you a copy of this book. Quickly, before I thank Lisa for the final time, next week at 4 p.m. ET, right here on A Mighty Mystery, I'm not on First Chapter Fun, I'm on A Mighty Blaze. Look what we have for you, Lori Rader Day.
That's on my TBR list.
Yeah, absolutely. Death at Greenway is about a nurse in Great Britain in World War II who takes a job taking care of evacuated children in Agatha Christie's Holiday Mansion. Now, I ask you, I know. Is that a great idea?
God. I'm so reading that.
Yes, and we are so full of author idea envy because that is a great idea. Death at Greenway, next week at 4, right here on A Mighty Blaze, on A Mighty Mystery. We will talk to the fabulous and hilarious and brilliant Lori Rader Day. So do not miss this. Talk about fabulous, brilliant, and hilarious Lisa Unger, whose Last Girl Ghosted is out today. And in about 2 seconds, we'll be done. And in about 3 seconds, you're going to run right out and get Last Girl Ghosted. You do not want to miss this. Lisa, thank you. Happy Pub Day.
Thank you so much, Hank. You're the best. You're amazing. I appreciate you.
Love you too. Thank you. And thank you all. Love you too. Comment people. We are so pleased that you are here today. See you next week and take care.